Jungkook couldn't take Jimin's arms off after the concert. There were tears accidentally dropped. Broken heart, revolving hearts, don't let go of me. Not tonight. Those were the first words Jungkook forced out, his voice cracking as he clung to Jimin in the dim backstage hallway, long before either of them understood how the night would shatter and rebuild everything between them. The air still throbbed with the echo of stadium screams, but here, behind the curtains, only the low buzz of flickering fluorescent lights remained. Sweat clung to Jungkook's temples, mixing with something warmer and heavier that he tried to blink away before it betrayed him. Jimin heard it anyway, the breath that quivered, the quiet choke swallowed too late. He tightened his arms around Jungkook's shoulders, grounding him. "Kook, what happened out there?" Jungkook didn't answer. His fingers curled into Jimin's shirt, knuckles pale, as if releasing him meant falling through the floor. People rushed back and forth behind them, staff, dancers, managers, but it all blurred into a distant smear. Only the frantic beat beneath Jungkook's ribcage felt real, echoing against Jimin's chest. The concert had been flawless to anybody watching. But Jungkook's mind was replaying the one moment just before the final encore when the stage lights had hit too bright, the roar of the crowd too loud, the memory he worked years to bury suddenly breaking through its chains. A face. A moment. A voice he hadn't heard in years. And the suffocating fear that he was no longer strong enough to pretend it didn't exist. Jimin sensed the shift mid-performance, saw Jungkook's eyes tremble even while he danced precisely, as if sheer discipline kept him from collapsing. Jimin, who always noticed the tremors no one else could see. Jimin, who always reached out first, now his hands cupped the back of Jungkook's neck, thumbs stroking the tense lines there. "Talk to me. You don't have to hold it in." "I'm not holding it in," Jungkook muttered, but the way his shoulders quivered betrayed him. "I'm just tired." Jimin knew it was a lie. A soft, trembling lie, one Jungkook used whenever he felt cornered by emotions he didn't know how to name. Jungkook hated appearing vulnerable, even to the person he trusted most. The hallway smelled faintly of stale popcorn and metal from the scaffolding, the world narrowing to the warmth between their bodies. Jimin leaned back just enough to meet Jungkook's eyes, then he froze. Tears had slipped down without Jungkook even noticing. "Kook," Jimin whispered, voice cracking. That was the moment Jungkook finally broke. Not because he was weak, but because Jimin's gaze made it safe to unravel. "I thought I was over it," Jungkook rasped. "But tonight, something snapped. For a second I couldn't breathe. And I didn't know how to make it stop." Jimin pulled him closer again, their foreheads touching. Jungkook could feel his own breath hitching as the tightness inside finally spilled out between them like light cracking through a fractured mirror. "Why didn't you tell me you were still carrying that?" Jimin asked quietly. "Because I didn't want you to look at me like this." "Like what?" "Like I'm breakable." Jimin exhaled softly, almost a laugh but too sad to be one. "I've never thought that. Being strong doesn't mean being untouched." Jungkook closed his eyes. Jimin smelled of sweat, cedar cologne, and the faint sweetness of the energy drink he'd downed before the encore. Familiar. Safe. Dangerous in how much Jungkook needed it. He swallowed. "When the lights hit, I saw him." Jimin's expression shifted. He knew exactly who Jungkook meant. The ghost Jungkook had never talked about directly but had been orbiting in silence for years, someone who once pushed him to perfection only to crush him under the weight of impossible expectations. A mentor turned shadow, whose absence left a deeper scar than his presence ever did. Jimin's fingers traced soothing circles on Jungkook's arm. "But he's not here anymore. You survived him." "That's the problem," Jungkook whispered. "I survived him, but he still owns parts of me." Jimin's heart tightened. He had his own ghosts too, ones he hid behind smiles and soft jokes. But Jungkook rarely cracked like this. For him to shake now meant the fear had dug deeper than words could show. Jimin guided Jungkook toward the small private dressing room at the end of the hall, locking the door behind them to block out the frantic post-concert chaos. Only the hum of the ventilation filled the space, along with the faint throb of bass still echoing in their bones. Jungkook sat on the couch, leaning forward with elbows on his knees. His hands trembled, and when Jimin lightly touched his wrist, Jungkook's breath hitched again. "I hate that you're seeing me like this," he murmured. "I don't." Jimin knelt in front of him, tilting his chin up with gentle fingers. "You don't have to carry everything alone. You never did. Silence stretched between them, heavy, charged, vulnerable. "Why are you always the one who catches me?" Jungkook asked softly. "Because you never ask anyone else to," Jimin replied. "And I won't let you fall." Jungkook's jaw tightened, emotions surging too fast for him to contain. He reached out, fingers sliding into Jimin's hair, pulling him closer, not out of desire, but desperation. A raw, human need for an anchor. Jimin steadied him with both hands on his cheeks, his thumbs brushing away the tears Jungkook refused to acknowledge, and finally, for the first time in years, Jungkook let himself cry without hiding it. Jimin didn't say anything this time. He simply held him, letting Jungkook's tears soak into his shirt, letting the shaking run its course. Minutes passed before Jungkook's breaths finally steadied, slow and uneven but real. Jimin's hands never left him, as if afraid Jungkook would disappear if he loosened his hold. "I'm sorry," Jungkook whispered. "Don't apologize for being human." Jungkook leaned his forehead against Jimin's shoulder, something warm twisting low in his chest, gratitude, fear, longing, all tangled hopelessly. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Just stay." "I'm not going anywhere," Jimin replied. Their shadows overlapped under the dim lights, the room humming softly as if holding its breath with them. The storm inside Jungkook eased, not gone, but no longer drowning him. Jungkook closed his eyes, letting the warmth of Jimin's arms calm the last of the tremors. And for the first time that night, the world felt quiet enough for him to breathe. The night did not end with answers, nor with dramatic revelations, but with something quieter and far more powerful, the knowledge that despite everything broken inside him, he was not alone. And for Jungkook, that was enough. Jimin had barely closed the dressing room door behind him when he felt Jungkook's hand catch his wrist again, more urgently this time, as if a current rippled through him and snapped his restraint. "Kook? What is it?" Jimin asked, startled by the force behind the grip. Jungkook's eyes were darker now, not from tears, but from something brimming just beneath the surface, fear, desperation, and a raw intensity Jimin rarely saw. "Even in him you walked out," Jungkook said quietly. "You were going to leave." Jimin shook his head, confused. "I stepped out to tell the manager we needed a minute alone. That's all." Jungkook swallowed hard, his fingers still locked around Jimin's wrist like he didn't trust himself to let go. "But I thought you were leaving me there. I thought you'd finally had enough." "Had enough of what?" Jimin whispered, inching closer when he saw the way Jungkook's shoulders tensed. "Of me," Jungkook murmured, and the words sounded like they'd been scraped out of him. "Of my mess. My moods. My damage." He exhaled shakily, voice barely holding itself up. "You shouldn't have to deal with any of this." Jimin stared at him, expression tightening with something sharp and protective. "Don't you dare decide for me what I can or can't handle." Jungkook's breath hitched at the intensity in Jimin's voice. There were times when Jimin spoke softly and soothed him like warm light. But there were also moments, rare, dangerous moments, when Jimin's voice cut through walls Jungkook didn't even realize he had built. This was one of them. Jimin stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. "If I stay, it's because I want to. If I hold you, it's because I choose to. Don't turn that into a burden." Jungkook's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. The air felt charged, thick with unsaid things. Not romantic, not even necessarily forbidden, just emotionally combustible, something neither of them had the vocabulary to contain. Jimin finally tugged his wrist free, but only to place his palm against Jungkook's jaw. His thumb brushed the corner of Jungkook's mouth where the tear tracks still glistened. "You think you're hard to love," Jimin said softly. "But you're not. You're just scared." Jungkook flinched at the word, but didn't pull away. Jimin continued, voice steady, almost too gentle. "Fear doesn't make you unworthy. It makes you human. And it makes you mine to hold when it gets too heavy." Something in Jungkook cracked open again, but this time it wasn't grief, it was heat, intensity, a sudden surge of emotion that made him grab Jimin's waist and pull him closer, almost instinctively. Jimin's breath caught, but he didn't retreat. "Jungkook," he whispered. "I can't lose you," Jungkook said, the confession slipping out before he could stop it. "I can face anything else. But not that. You're not losing me." Jimin pressed his forehead against Jungkook's. "But you need to tell me what actually happened out there. You're keeping something from me." Jungkook's jaw tightened. His grip around Jimin's waist tensed. For a second, Jimin saw a flash of something dark: anger, fear, Maybe both, before Jungkook forced himself to breathe. You wouldn't believe me, Jungkook said, try me. Jungkook hesitated. His fingers curled into the back of Jimin's shirt, gripping harder than before, as if terrified the truth itself would push Jimin away. I saw him, Jungkook said finally, voice so quiet Jimin barely heard it. I know, Jimin replied gently. You told me you thought of him. No, Chim, Jungkook whispered. I didn't just remember him. I saw him. In the crowd. Jimin froze, Jungkook swallowed hard. He was there. Front row. Staring at me. And when the lights hit, it felt like I was 18 again, trapped under everything he used to control. It felt like he reached inside me and twisted the part of me I spent years trying to heal. Jimin's pulse jumped. Are you sure? He asked. Jungkook nodded, trembling. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. And when I blinked, he was gone. Like he knew exactly when to disappear. Jimin's fingers tightened around Jungkook's jaw, steadying him. He has no right to be here. Not in your life. Not anywhere near you. I know, Jungkook said, voice hoarse. But if he came back? I don't know what he wants. Whatever he wants, he won't get it, Jimin said, with a conviction so strong it startled Jungkook. Jimin took Jungkook's hand and pressed it flat against his own chest, right over his heartbeat. You're not theirs anymore. You're not anybody's shadow. Jungkook's eyes softened, his body leaning into Jimin as if pulled by gravity he couldn't resist, but then Jimin added quietly, and if he really did show up tonight, then we need to prepare. Jungkook's heart thudded hard. Prepare for what? For whatever he's planning, Jimin said. Because people like him don't resurface for nothing. Jungkook looked at him, fear and trust warring in his eyes. Chim, are you scared? Jimin gave a small, honest nod. Yeah. I am. But I'm not scared of him. He cupped Jungkook's cheeks with both hands, grounding him. I'm scared of what you'll do to yourself if he gets in your head again. Jungkook exhaled shakily, eyes glistening again, but for a different reason now, because someone finally understood the real threat wasn't the man in the crowd, but the psychological chains he once forged, and that understanding, spoken aloud by Jimin, hit Jungkook harder than any flash of memory ever could. Jimin leaned in, not quite touching Jungkook's lips, but so close Jungkook felt the warmth of his breath. Look at me, Jimin whispered. You're not alone in this war. Jungkook's eyes fluttered open, his breath trembling, the storm inside him shifting slowly from panic into determination fed by Jimin's unwavering presence. Then stay, Jungkook whispered. Stay close. I'm stronger when you're here. Jimin didn't hesitate. He climbed onto the couch beside him, looping an arm around Jungkook's shoulders and pulling him into a firm, grounding hold. I'm not going anywhere, Jimin murmured. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until you can look at the world without shaking. Jungkook rested his head against Jimin's shoulder, their breaths sinking unconsciously. The tension in his body slowly uncoiled under Jimin's steady warmth outside. Staff still rushed, the world still moved, but inside the small dressing room, time felt suspended around them, two hearts pounding, two minds racing, two people clinging to each other against something neither fully understood yet. Jungkook closed his eyes, letting the rare safety wash over him. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now Jimin was here, and that was enough for both of them. The dressing room had gone almost completely quiet, the kind of stillness that felt deliberate, like the world outside was holding its breath while something dangerous and delicate unfolded between them. Jungkook sat with his back pressed against the couch, his breath finally steadying, while Jimin stayed tucked at his side, fingers absently tracing circles onto Jungkook's forearm in a way that both soothed and unsettled him. Kook, Jimin said softly, tell me what you felt when you saw him. Not what you think I want to hear. What you actually felt. Jungkook didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted toward the dim bulb overhead, the shadows carving sharp lines across his jaw. It wasn't fear at first, he admitted. It was anger. Violent anger. The kind that scares me because I don't know what I'm capable of when it hits. Jimin's breath caught. Anger at him? Anger at myself, Jungkook corrected. For letting him still have that power. For letting one look undo years of healing. Jimin shifted, turning his body fully toward Jungkook. His knees brushed Jungkook's thigh, and the sudden closeness made Jungkook's pulse jump in a way unrelated to fear. Jimin didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did, and kept going anyway. Kook, listen, Jimin said, voice low and steady. Trauma isn't a switch. It doesn't disappear just because you moved forward. If he came back to haunt you, that's not weakness. That's human. Jungkook laughed under his breath, humorless. I don't feel human. I feel like a machine someone broke and forgot to fix. You're not a machine, Jimin murmured. Machines don't tremble when someone touches them. He let his thumb graze along Jungkook's jawline, barely there. You feel everything. Too much sometimes. Jungkook swallowed hard. I hate when you say things like that. Why? Jimin asked. Because you make it sound like feeling is a strength. It is, Jimin said simply. Something shifted between them, some electric current neither of them could pretend not to feel. Jungkook angled his body slightly closer, whether intentional or instinctive, Jimin couldn't tell. Their knees brushed again, this time lingering, but before either of them could address that tension, a sharp knock rattled the door. Jimin jerked slightly. Jungkook stiffened instantly, a flash of fear crossing his face so fast Jimin almost missed it. He placed a steadying hand on Jungkook's knee. It's okay, Jimin whispered. I'm here. The knocking continued, louder now. Jungkook. Jimin. It's urgent. Open up. It was their manager's voice, tight, strained, unusual. Jimin and Jungkook exchanged a glance, both sensing the shift in atmosphere. Jimin rose first, but Jungkook grabbed his wrist again, not with panic this time, but with something else, protectiveness. Let me open it, Jungkook said. If it's bad news. I'd rather hear it first. Jimin hesitated. Jungkook's voice was steady, but his hand was trembling again. Still, Jimin nodded, stepping aside but staying close, ready to intervene if needed. Jungkook opened the door just enough to see their manager's face, pale, sweating, clearly shaken. Hyung? What happened? The manager looked past Jungkook, eyes flicking toward the room, then lowered his voice. Both of you need to come with me. Now. Jimin stepped forward, frowning. Why? What's going on? The manager hesitated again. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Security just informed us. Someone was backstage earlier. Someone who shouldn't have been here. Someone who bypassed 3 checkpoints. Jungkook's blood turned to ice. His fingers tightened around the doorknob. Jimin's voice dropped. Describe him. The manager seemed afraid to say the words, like speaking them aloud would make the threat too real. Tall. Dark jacket. Black cap. He never showed his face to cameras. But some staff members said he approached them asking where Jungkook's prep room was. Jungkook's breath hitched so sharply it sounded like a gasp. Jimin instantly placed a hand on his back, grounding him. No, Jungkook whispered. No. It can't be him. Jimin felt the tremor beneath his palm, the way Jungkook's breath turned shallow again. Hyung, Jimin said, voice sharp. Did he touch anyone? Did he try to get inside this room? He didn't get that far, the manager replied. But he was close. Too close. And when staff confronted him, he slipped away before security arrived. He glanced at Jungkook, his voice softening. Is there something you two need to tell me? Jungkook couldn't respond. His mind was spiraling fast, dragging him into the memory he had spent years burying, the pressure of hands on his shoulders, the voice that told him he'd never be enough without him, the manipulation dressed as mentorship. But Jimin stepped in before Jungkook could drown. We'll explain later, Jimin said firmly. Right now, we need to know if anyone saw where he went. No, the manager answered. He vanished. Jungkook released a shaky breath, leaning slightly into the wall for support. Jimin stepped closer, offering silent stability. The manager's voice lowered again. Security wants to keep you two in the private lounge until they sweep the entire building. They think it might be safer if you stay together. We're not splitting up, Jimin said instantly. Jungkook shot him a faint, startled look. Jimin didn't look away. The manager nodded. Good. Then follow me. But before he turned to lead them out, he placed a hand on Jungkook's shoulder, hesitant, gentle. You're safe. Both of you. Security's on high alert. Jungkook nodded, but his voice failed him again. Jimin took the lead, placing a steadying hand on Jungkook's back as they followed the manager. The hallway felt different now, colder, narrower, as if every shadow hid a threat. Jungkook's eyes flicked around nervously, and Jimin subtly stepped closer, close enough that their arms brushed with every step. Kook, Jimin murmured, low enough for only him to hear, breathe. I am, Jungkook whispered back. I can't stop thinking, what if he really came for me? Then he came to the wrong place, Jimin said. Because he'll have to get through me first. Jungkook's chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something warm and overwhelming. He glanced at Jimin, and the intensity he found there nearly stole his breath. Why are you always like this? Jungkook whispered. Like what? Like you'd burn the whole world just to protect me. Jimin didn't break eye contact. Maybe I would. Jungkook's pulse stuttered, but before either of them could say anything more, the door to the private lounge opened, and the manager guided them inside. The moment the door closed, Jungkook exhaled shakily, leaning against the wall. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a trembling vulnerability that made Jimin move toward him instantly. Kook, Jimin said gently, come here. Jungkook didn't resist. He stepped forward and pressed his forehead to Jimin's shoulder, his breath shuddering. Jimin wrapped his arms around him, tight, protective, steady. You're safe, Jimin whispered again. As long as I'm here, you're safe. Jungkook clung to him, not out of weakness, but because the one person who always caught him was the only thing keeping him from collapsing, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside could be crumbling, threats closing in, memories resurfacing like ghosts with teeth, but here, in the dim quiet of the lounge, Jimin held him like nothing could break through the warmth between them. Jungkook finally managed a breath steadier than the last. Chim, he whispered, yeah? Don't let go. I won't, Jimin murmured, tightening his hold, and he didn't. For a long time, he didn't. The lights in the private lounge were dimmed to a low amber glow, enough to soften the edges of the room but not enough to disguise the tension saturating the air. Jungkook sat on the couch with his elbows on his knees, head bowed, running trembling fingers through his damp hair. Jimin paced the room in short, tight steps, glancing at the door every few seconds as if half expecting it to burst open. Neither spoke for a while. Silence stretched, thick and electric, threaded with fear and something simmering just beneath the surface. Then Jungkook finally lifted his head. Chim, he said quietly, do you think I'm overreacting? Jimin stopped pacing. No, he replied without hesitation. You're not. Jungkook stared at him, eyes dark and swirling with emotion. You say that like you're sure. I am sure, Jimin said, stepping closer. I know you. I know the difference between your fear and your instinct. And tonight, your instinct was screaming. Jungkook inhaled sharply, almost defensively. But what if it was a trick of the light? A stranger with the same build, his voice cracked just slightly, betraying the hope he didn't dare cling to. I'm not saying I want to be wrong, but you're not wrong, Jimin cut in softly. Not this time. Jungkook's eyes flickered with something sharp, fear mixed with the kind of trust he tried so hard not to show. Jimin walked toward him, and Jungkook's gaze tracked him with an intensity that made Jimin's heartbeat thrum in his ears. Chim, Jungkook murmured, don't look at me like that. Like what? Jimin asked, stopping right in front of him. Like you already know how this ends. Jimin's chest tightened. I'm looking at you like I'm not letting him touch your life again, he said quietly. Not even a shadow of him. Jungkook exhaled through his nose, the sound shaky. You're talking like you'd fight him. I would, Jimin answered simply. Jungkook swallowed hard, something fierce flashing across his face before he quickly looked down at his hands. I don't want you getting hurt because of me. You don't get to decide that, Jimin said. Not when you're shaking like this. Jungkook blinked, startled. I'm not. You are, Jimin interrupted. Your shoulders are. Your hands are. Your breathing is. He softened his voice. You're allowed to be scared, Kook. You don't have to pretend around me. Jungkook clenched his jaw. Pretending is easier than admitting I still feel controlled by a ghost. Jimin crouched in front of him until they were almost eye level. Jungkook's breath hitched as Jimin reached out, fingertips brushing his cheek. Jungkook didn't flinch. He leaned into the touch without even realizing it. You're not controlled, Jimin whispered. You're wounded. And wounds don't disappear just because you try to ignore them. Jungkook's eyes glistened. His voice was low, shaky. Why do you care this much? Jimin froze for a heartbeat. Jungkook rarely asked direct questions like this. The vulnerability in the air sharpened instantly. I care because you matter to me, Jimin said. More than you think. Jungkook's breath faltered. His eyes flicked to Jimin's lips for barely a second, barely, but Jimin saw it. The tension in the room deepened, thickened, something warm and dangerous curling through the silence. Jimin didn't move away. Instead, he placed a hand on Jungkook's knee, grounding him. You don't have to hold everything in, he whispered. Not with me. Jungkook's voice cracked. But what if letting you in hurts you? Jimin let out a shaky breath. Then let it. I'd rather be hurt than shut out. Jungkook stared at him like he was seeing something impossible. Something forbidden. Something he'd been too afraid to name. Before either of them could process the shift in the air, there was movement outside the lounge door, rapid footsteps, hurried whispers, the snap of a radio. Jungkook tensed instantly, his hand clutching Jimin's wrist with sudden force. Jimin reacted immediately, instinctively stepping between Jungkook and the door. Don't, Jungkook murmured, voice trembling with both fear and frustration. Don't put yourself in front of me like that. You shouldn't have to. I want to, Jimin shot back. The door opened abruptly, making Jungkook flinch so hard Jimin reached back and steadied him with a hand on his chest. A security guard stepped inside, face pale. We finished sweeping the backstage area. The man hasn't been found. He's no longer in the venue, but we can't confirm how he got in or out. Jimin's eyes hardened. So he knew how to avoid detection. Yes, the guard said. And he knew exactly where to go. Someone had access to restricted areas without triggering alarms. Jungkook's stomach dropped. So it was planned. Most likely. The guard looked from Jungkook to Jimin. We'll assign 2 men to accompany you both until your transportation arrives. Please stay in this room until then. When the guard left, closing the door behind him, Jungkook let out a harsh, trembling exhale. Planned, he repeated, almost to himself. He planned to come here. To find me. Jimin sat beside him, close enough that their knees touched. Then we stay alert. We stay smart. We stay together. Jungkook stared ahead, jaw tight. He said he'd never let me go, he whispered. Years ago. He said. He stopped, breath shaking. He said I'd always belong to him. Jimin's hand shot up, cupping Jungkook's face firmly, making him look into his eyes. You belong to no one, he said, voice sharp. Especially not him. Jungkook looked at Jimin, and something inside him finally snapped. An invisible tension thread pulled too tight for too long. He grabbed Jimin's wrist, pulling him closer with a force that made Jimin gasp softly. Kook, Jimin breathed. I don't want him controlling me, Jungkook said, voice rough. I don't want him taking anything from me ever again. His gaze flickered to Jimin's face, his throat working as he swallowed. Especially not you. Jimin froze, caught off guard by the rawness of the confession. You're the only thing that keeps me steady, Jungkook whispered, forehead pressing against Jimin's. The only thing that matters tonight. Jimin's heartbeat thundered so loudly he wondered if Jungkook could hear it. Kook, he murmured, I'm not going anywhere. Jungkook exhaled shakily, eyes fluttering shut. He leaned into Jimin like gravity itself had shifted, like the only thing holding him upright was Jimin's steady warmth. Jimin wrapped an arm around him without hesitation, pulling him in, anchoring him. The world outside could be crawling with ghosts and threats and shadows with familiar faces, but in that room, under that dim amber light, Jungkook clung to Jimin like he was the only place left on earth that felt safe, and Jimin held him just as fiercely, like letting go wasn't even an option. The door slammed so loudly that the walls trembled, and for a moment neither Jungkook nor Jimin said anything. The practice room was dark except for the thin strip of neon light leaking through the hallway. Jungkook stood with his back against the door, chest rising sharply, eyes flickering like someone trapped between running away and collapsing. Jimin turned slowly, his face still flushed from the argument backstage, his breath uneven, his hands trembling in a way he tried to hide behind folded arms. The silence between them stretched like a pulled wire ready to snap. Why did you do that? Jungkook finally asked, his voice low, hoarse, the kind that came from swallowed anger. Why did you let him touch you like that on stage? You knew he was doing it to provoke me. Jimin blinked, taken aback by the raw, unfiltered accusation. Jungkook, it was Choreo. It's a concert. It's performance. Why are you making it? Don't, Jungkook cut in sharply, stepping away from the door. Don't act like you didn't see the way he looked at you. Jimin exhaled, eyes closing briefly. You're not making sense. I'm making perfect sense, Jungkook replied, stepping closer, until the air between them felt charged, electric. You pushed me away after the encore. You didn't even look at me. And then you let him. Are you jealous? Jimin asked quietly. The room's stillness broke. Jungkook looked away, jaw tightening, fingers curling into fists he didn't know what to do with. Jimin watched every movement, every conflicted breath, and something inside him twisted, fear, confusion, longing, anger, all tangled in a knot he couldn't name. I'm not, Jungkook started, but the lie collapsed halfway. You disappeared. I thought something was wrong. Jimin let out a laugh that wasn't really a laugh, only a fragile exhale carrying exhaustion. Everything is wrong, Jungkook. That made Jungkook look up immediately, panic flickering across his features. He took another step forward, closing the last distance between them until Jimin could feel the heat of his breath, see the fear behind his eyes. Tell me, Jungkook whispered, voice cracking just enough to betray what he didn't want to admit. Tell me what's wrong. Please. Jimin's eyes glistened. He shook his head, looking away as his throat tightened. You think I'm angry because of him? No. I'm angry at you. At myself. At everything. Jungkook's breath caught. At me. You don't know what you're doing to me, Jimin said, voice trembling, not with weakness but with emotion pressed too hard for too long. You act like you care more than you should, but then you pull back. You hold my arm after the concert like you're afraid to lose me, but then you pretend it means nothing. You confuse me. Constantly. Jungkook swallowed, his heartbeat audible in the heavy silence. Jimin. I didn't mean to. You did, Jimin said. And I let you. And that's on me. Jungkook reached toward him instinctively, but Jimin stepped back. The rejection wasn't harsh, but it was enough to make Jungkook's chest twist painfully. You're running from something, Jimin continued softly. And I don't know if I'm supposed to chase you or walk away before I get hurt. Jungkook shook his head, stepping closer again, slowly this time, cautiously, like approaching someone wounded. Don't walk away. Then tell me what you want, Jimin whispered. Jungkook opened his mouth but no words came out. Not because he didn't have an answer, he had too many, all tangled, all dangerous. Fear, longing, attachment, confusion. They churned behind his eyes like a storm he had no control over. Jimin waited. Jungkook's voice, when it finally came out, was barely a breath. I don't know how to say it. Jimin looked defeated for a moment, the kind of quiet devastation that came from hoping too long. He turned away, walking toward the mirror-lined wall, touching his reflection as if searching for something he'd lost. You're scared, he said softly. You always have been. Jungkook's voice cracked. I'm scared of losing you. Jimin froze when he turned back around, his eyes were wide, vulnerable, almost disbelieving. Jungkook stepped forward, his face open, honest in a way he rarely allowed himself to be. I'm scared, Jungkook repeated. Of what this is. Of how strong it is. Of how strong you are in my life. I've never felt anything like it. And it terrifies me. Jimin's breath faltered, something fragile shifting inside him. And that's why you get angry when someone else gets close? He asked. Jungkook nodded slowly. Yes. And that's why you held me so tightly after the concert? Another nod. Smaller. More helpless. And that's why you looked like you were about to cry? Jungkook didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was already in his eyes, unsteady, glowing, raw. Jimin stepped toward him then, closing the space he had put between them earlier. Jungkook didn't move. He simply let him come closer, as if afraid the moment would shatter if he breathed too deeply. You could have just said that, Jimin whispered. I didn't know how, Jungkook confessed. Jimin studied him for a long moment, his expression a mixture of frustration, affection, and something deeper, heavier, more complicated. You still don't, Jimin said. I'm trying, Jungkook replied quietly. The room seemed to pulse with their breaths, their unspoken truths, their mistakes, their fears, their desperate attempts to understand each other. Jimin's voice softened. So what now? Jungkook looked at him with eyes that held too many answers and no clarity at all. I don't know, he said. But I don't want you to walk away. Jimin closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. When he opened them again, there was a storm behind them, pain, longing, conflict, but also a faint light trying to break through. I'm not walking away, Jimin whispered. Not yet. Silence fell again. But this time, it wasn't cold or sharp. It was warm, heavy, fragile, like the first breath after almost drowning. They stood there in that dim room, two people bruised by unspoken truths, caught between fear and desire, pulled together by something neither of them fully understood. Outside, the hallway lights flickered. Inside, their breaths aligned in a quiet, trembling rhythm neither of them knew how to break.